Hello and welcome to this Island Life programme, which today is an extract from a Journey to a Dream podcast. Now, this podcast is all about talking to road racers and finding out what it is that makes them tick. The people that we're going to hear from today are very well known, certainly here on the Isle of Man and further afield. And it really does highlight that very often racing is a family affair. We're going to be hearing from Jim and Ben Gale, sons of Dicky Gale, who is the TT sidecar passenger with the second most starts and is just such a character. I'm going to be honest, there are some tales that I haven't included in this programme, but if you go to the Journey to a Dream podcast, you'll be able to hear some interesting stories about how Dicky got started. But first of all, I asked him to explain how he got into racing in the first place.
Dream started probably when I was about 10 or 11, watching the bikes, the TT at the end of Cronkerfoddy Straight. But before then, used to go and watch all the early morning practices for the Southern 100. I just used to walk down the road from my parents' house, 4 o'clock in the morning, get a good seat at Ballabeg Hairpin and watch the bikes from there. My Uncle David used to race solos, semi-pro. They had a deal between them and Mike Halewood's dad, Stan. When Halewood was finished with his bikes for the year, Stan would sell them to my Uncle David, or to his father. And so he did solos. He did the TT, 125s, 250s.
So what was it about being a passenger particularly? Why was it that you thought that's what you wanted to do?
Couldn't reach the handlebars.
That could have been a problem, yeah. Basically, the thing about it was me and one of my mates, Paul Farger, we were going to buy a sidecar between us, and I was going to be the driver and Paul was going to be the passenger. It was all set up, we're going to do it, and then something happened and we didn't have enough money to actually buy the bike. And then one night I was out with my cousin Bobby, underage drinking and riding a motorbike at the same time, with Bobby on the back of the bike and hadn't passed me test. Took Bobby home and his dad went, "You're not going anywhere until I've got some coffee down your throat." And we just sat talking in the kitchen, and he said, "You've ever thought of racing these bikes?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always wanted to have a go." And he said, "Well, I'll finish paying my mortgage off." So he said, "I fancy having a go at sidecar racing. Would you get in the sidecar?" And with the alcohol in me, he said, "Go on, I'll do it." Went home, promptly forgot everything about it, and 3 weeks later, Wally, again, I was down at Bobby's house, and Wally comes up and says, "I bought the sidecar." "What sidecar?" "You said you're going to be the passenger." "Did I?" "Well, I suppose I better have a go then." And that was how it started.
What happened next? What do you remember about the process to getting to a start line?
Basically, we went with Wally down to where he worked at the Marine Biological Station. He was the skipper on one of their boats, the Kumar. He had the bike hidden in his lockup down at the Marine Biological Station. Went down, had a look at it. It was a 550 Honda 4, the 16-inch front wheel, a 10-inch back wheel, and it looked like a wheelbarrow wheel on the side. But it was good enough. We got it fired up. Took a couple of illegal laps of the island down at the Marine Biological Station. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Go on then, we'll have a go." So then it was literally a case of getting leathers, crash helmets, applying for the licence, and off to the first meeting at Derby, which was a test day. We borrowed a Ford Transit van to go up with, and as we were driving up, the key lever came off in his hand, and while we were messing around trying to get that in, the passenger door fell off the van. So we decided to leave the van there, and one of my parents' neighbours came along with his van and towed us up to Derby and towed us back again afterwards. That was it. We just got to Derby, went out on the track, had a go, promptly broke down. David and Barry Costain pulled in to see if they could help, and while Barry was messing with the bike, David waved to me, shouted, "Get on." So I climbed on his bike and he set off, and we did 4 laps before we were flagged off the circuit and given my first telling off by a clerk of the course for switching bikes during a test session, which was not allowed to be done unless you were doing it in pit lane.
Your first telling off. I'm just going to guess here, Dicky, but I wonder if there have been a few more over the years.
There's been a few, yeah. Gary Thompson gave me my last telling off.
Now, Dicky, one of the things when I've been doing this podcast is that what you need to be able to really commit yourself to this sport is somebody in your life who really understands it. And if you, I suppose, were married to somebody who didn't really get it, that would be tricky. Tell me about meeting your other half.
Mon. Yeah, well, she came to watch the TT with her boyfriend at the time. Came over from Switzerland to watch the TT, and we met up in the Mitre pub. But there was a big bunch of us. They all used to camp at Glenwillan on an area that they called we all christened it United Nations, because there was people from all different countries there: Swiss, English, German, Dutch, French. There was all sorts up there, but everybody knocked around together. So that's where we met up. And she came for a couple of years with her boyfriend, and then he went off to work in Japan, and she came over by herself. And no, nothing happened before anybody started sleeping forward. Came to the TT, left the TT, went to Japan, spent 6 months travelling around the Far East, went back to Switzerland, and they got married and had 2 boys, Mark and Tommy, my 2 eldest, my stepsons. And then the marriage fell apart. She came over to watch the Southern 100. They came to a wedding that I was best man at, of one of our other mates. And then they turned up at the Southern 100 in 94, and we started to get friendly again. 95, the marriage split up. 96, we got married. She moved to the Isle of Man, February 96. Got married on the Saturday morning, 1st of June. Went off, did the sidecar race A. And then we had the wedding reception. Ronaldsway Social Club, sadly no longer. But the whole sidecar paddock came down for the reception on a bus that I borrowed from work. Sorry, hired. Didn't borrow it, boss. One of the other lads from the garage drove it for me and brought all the sidecar paddock down for the party. And boy, was it a party.
Your mum had 2 boys who are with us now. Sort of imagining these 2 little boys presumably coming around the paddock with you.
They've never known anything else. The 4 boys, Mark and Tommy as well, they came everywhere with us. Every race meeting I went to, they were there. Jim used to come down. They moved the riders signing on to the Sunday night before the first practice early morning on the Monday. We went down and Jim came with us, and he was sitting in the briefing and leaning against a wall in the corner, keeping out of the way of everybody, was Joey. That's Jim's hero. Jim sees Joey. Oh, Joey Lop. Disappears off my knee, straight over to Joey, and spent the whole riders briefing sitting on Joey's knee.
Jim, what do you remember about that time?
All the memories that we've got of most family holidays and stuff has been going away racing. Dad racing in Belgium. Ever since we've been around, he's always been racing, so it's always been either up at Derby, Southern 100 paddock, the TT paddock, like I say, places in Belgium or in England, depending on what it was. So we've just always known it, always.
Ben, do you think there was ever any question that this was going to be a path that you 2 would take?
Well, Jim originally wanted to be a passenger when he was growing up, so that probably would have put it a little bit in question, because I am a little too mental to be a driver.
Can't disagree with that. Can't disagree with that at all.
It's good to have that awareness, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'd be upside down more times than I'd be on 3 wheels. So yeah, that probably would have stopped it. And then I had other hobbies outside of racing that nearly took over, but then it was when Jim bought the bike, it was meant to be one of his mates on from the pub, failed his eye test, so he couldn't jump on. And then Rhys Gibbons, now TT 3rd place, yeah, he jumped on for one little track day up at Derby with Jim.
And hated it. Absolutely hated it.
It wasn't your driving, Jim.
Every 2 laps he'd tap Jim to get him to stop.
People find it crazy that we race sidecars as it is, and then they go, "You the driver or the passenger?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm the passenger." They go, "Oh, so you're the completely mental one?" Yes, that's me. But it just doesn't feel it. The first time you get on and you look down and there's like a gap where Jim's brake is, where you can see through to the floor. First time I went on and I looked through that gap, and I was like, "That's pretty close, that actually. That's the floor's right there. That would hurt." And now it's almost a comfort to look down. It's like, okay, yeah, we're still moving, so we're doing better. When we first went out, it was working everything I could possibly work corner-wise. It was, right, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Come back in, be absolutely exhausted after every single time I'd done it, even though we weren't fast at all. I mean, the very first time we went round Derby, we were over 2 minutes for one lap. And I was knackered. And then that was like Dad and other passengers around being like, you don't have to always be jumping to different parts of the bike at all moments of a thing. And it was then settling down and kind of working out what you do have to do and kind of pacing yourself as well.
I went on the back of my brother Mark's motorbike as a pillion and hated it. So I was like, if I do then get a sidecar, I want to be a driver, because I do not like being not in control of the handlebars.
So in terms then of you, Ben and Jim, sort of saying to your dad, did you ever sort of have to have a conversation about, this is what we're going to do? Was it just something that was expected?
It was him that dragged me into it. So I also do a lot of amateur dramatics on the island. So when I left school, I was kind of doing a lot of that. And that was taking up most of my time. I went up for the test day that Rhys jumped on, and then after that it was a case of went down for dinner afterwards, and then Dad was like, right, so it's about time that you got your race licence, because Jim needs a passenger. So that was it. It was then a case of, okay, signing up for that. So it wasn't a sit down and have a conversation if we're going to ride together. It was come on, it's your turn.
Sounds like I've bullied him into it, doesn't it?
No.
It was awful peer pressure.
Jim, we're talking, I mean, we're not that long away now from Southern 100. You're the current Andreas Racing Association sidecar champions as well. So it feels like you've made a massive leap. So not that big a time, really. Tell us how you found the whole process, how preparations are going for the Southern, and how do you prepare for that mentally as well?
Yeah, the rise that we've had in the past year, I'd say, has been pretty big, because we were trundling around at the back at Derby a couple of years ago and just trying to find our feet. And then it was last year it all kind of started to click. We ended up having battles with Dave Quirk until he had his accident at TT. So when then he wasn't there, we then had to find more pace to then catch up with the other guys to start battling with them, which we somehow did. And I think we dropped like 8 seconds in lap time last year around Derby, just to try and catch up with people. We got to the point where we were fighting at the front, and just turning up and actually finishing races allowed us to then win the championship, which at the start of the year wasn't in any of our plans. It just kind of happened, which was amazing. And then similar to that, it was going into Southern 100 this year, we were like, we want to try and get to it in the next 2 years, we said, but we had to get our national licence, because unlike in Dad's day where you could just forge your stuff, it's a lot stricter now. And it wasn't just you had to finish races, you have to finish them within a certain amount of time with the race leader. So we had to go across to England a couple of times, and it was going across to the English tracks and riding against loads of other sidecars, because there's no
racing.
Yeah, because there's no Formula Ones over here, and so riding against them, riding against really fast F2s like Founds and Greg Lambert and stuff like that, riding against these guys, we learned so much. It kind of like heightened our learning curve even more. So we came into this year thinking, right, we've got to get, I think it was 5 signatures.
Yeah.
So we'd earmarked 5 race meetings that we wanted to do, and it was like, right, if we can get it in these 5, that'll be great. But we know that some of them are going to be difficult because of the calibre of people that we'd be coming up against. And we did it in the first 3 events that we went to, and it was like...
We went to. The very first one we wanted to go to, we didn't let us in.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give you an entry.
Yeah, we couldn't do that one, but the ones that we actually did get an entry for, because all of the big names didn't turn up, we managed to pick up our pace enough to get up to where we needed to be, and we got all of the signatures that we needed to get our licence to put in for the Southern.
When the boys started out, they're racing at Derby and they're up against Ryan and Callum, Dave Molyneux and Dan Sale, Harry Payne and people like that. You know, guys that are lapping the TT course at well in excess of 110 mile an hour. And then once you take those 3 that were racing like that year out, and you've got Melly, Quirky and people like that, Jacko, 108 mile an hour lappers at the TT course, and then you had Jim and Ben. So everything that they're trying to do is they're chasing dots in the distance. Once we got rid of the Amar and went to the KTM, it was Dave's idea. He sold us on the idea, and it's been brilliant for us. Turned in a bit of a mare for Dave, but for us, the move to the KTM has been the best thing that we could have done. We haven't got the budget that our rivals have got. So KTM came in at the right price, at the right time. Dave helped us out with so much stuff that he didn't need anymore, because he'd gone to the next size up KTM engine, so he sold us a lot of stuff that he didn't want or couldn't use, is a better way of putting it. And so we've been able to develop the bike up at our speed while they're gaining speed as well. It wasn't until they started to get quicker that we started to find problems. But we've been lucky in the fact that we've got in with a friend of ours, Tim, who's an engineering nerd, and he loves KTM, absolutely loves the KTM, and he's got connections with KTM in Holland. So he's asking the people in Holland, what should we do to do this, what should we do that, and they give him the information, and we raise the money to buy the bits.
You sort of say it like that's easy, but I can imagine, and I don't know what it's been like for you, Ben and Jim, some of the people that I've spoken to throughout this podcast really struggle with the idea of going out to people and asking them to help fund their racing, because they feel that it's something that you're passionate about, but why should other people support you? What's that process been like?
Hard, I would say. It's a very difficult thing to almost sell. Quite a lot of it is almost relying on friends and friends of the family and stuff like that. We're lucky that a lot of like family friends are all from when Dad was racing as well, so they're all also racing mad.
So they get it, don't they? Yeah.
So they get it.
Yeah.
So we've been quite lucky in that sense. I mean, we've got one of our other mechanics, Andy, was actually one of Dad's mechanics. So he mechanicked Dad, and then he's come through, and now he's also helping us with the bike. Chris is another one that's joined us, and it's been invaluable to have these people around who fortunately are also racing mad and love the idea. But I can imagine for other people, when it's you're just starting into it and maybe it is just you who's kind of got the thing in your head, it would be almost impossible, because you go to businesses and half the time it's kind of what can you actually offer them for their sponsorship, and it's quite difficult in that sense.
Unless you're at the front at the TT, most people aren't too interested. We're very lucky in the sponsors that we've got. We've got the Old Market Inn, who have been amazing for us
Right from the beginning.
but we got them because I used to work in the Rovers, and Dave, who ran the market, and now Colin, who's in charge, I've worked with them while I was there, so that's how we got in with them. Got Forever RR, who run the campsite down at Colby during TT. Obviously, we're from Colby Football Club. I helped set the first campsite up when we did it, so we had it in with them originally. Test and maintenance, Ben works for them, so he kind of like bullied them into it.
Didn't? That was my Christmas bonus, that was.
Gandhi and Riding Electrical Services. Jay Gandhi's a massive friend of ours. He plays for the football club, so again, I bullied him into that one. It does take a lot of work. I spent a long time writing letters and emails and stuff to other businesses for them to, most of the time, not even respond. But you've just got to keep working and finding different ways of funding it.
As we speak, we're 2.5 weeks away from the start of the Southern, dare I ask? How is that sort of mentally thinking about everything that needs to be done before that Monday practice starts?
We were testing up at Derby this weekend, and we got off the bike, and it was kind of like a surreal thing of thinking the next time we're on the sidecar we're going to be riding past our childhood house.
I'm getting all emotional.
Which is a bit of a surreal thought, but it's a lot of excitement. The nerves will kick in. They haven't quite yet, which I'm surprised at, but it's still a lot of excitement. But we still know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Laps around the track, me watching onboards endlessly.
Dicky, I am intrigued as to how you think it's going to be standing on the sidelines watching your boys go around, because you're heavily involved in the Southern 100 Club, so presumably you'll be
I've
there
got a
as an
committee meeting
official.
tonight.
Yeah.
I'll be in the same place as I was last year. Bricking it. Can't deny it. But I'm in the best place because I've got the headphone. I know where they are. So I'll have more information than Mr. Kinley will, thankfully. It's not going to be easy, but it's their life.
And in terms of advice to them, are you quite quick to give advice? Do they take advice from you?
It depends what the advice is.
Some of it's telling me not to showboat so much.
Yeah, Ben tends to
Which I
showboat
agree
quite a
with.
lot.
I do theatre if there's a camera.
I was gonna say,
sometimes
come
I can't
on.
help it.
There's videos of Ben doing the Macarena on the back of the sidecar.
Again, I need to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I've got
that-
that one.
We've got that on the phone, yeah. After they broke down at Cadwell Park and they were being towed back to the pits, Ben's on the back of the bike doing the Macarena.
I even got the dance wrong, it's awful.
Well, he couldn't use the footwork, so yeah, it depends. I mean, at times with Jim, I did all my football coaching and stuff like that, and there's times when when you've got to be forceful in what you want to say, and there's times when you've got to do it quietly and gently. Like on Sunday, came on off the track, and Tim, the mechanic, looked at me and went, "Are you going to tell him?" And I said, "You're changing down too early for that left-hander." I walked away. And he just turned to Tim and he went, "What do you mean? What does he mean?" I'm turning around. What does he mean? And Tim says, "You should take it a bit quicker. You've got proper suspension now. It'll go round." Because we've just put brand new suspension on the bike that we had to fundraise for. But so we've got Nitronic front and rear suspension. First time since we've had the bike where the back wheel actually goes up and down like it's supposed to. And the front wheel stays on the road now instead of leaning over when it's cornering, because one suspension unit was working better than the other, but we just didn't have the money to do it. But there's no way they were going on the road without decent suspension on it. So Jim set up the GoFundMe page to raise the money for it, and we got the money, we got the target.
There's a real sense, I think, that particularly now, and I think the image of sidecar racing has been elevated in recent years. I know it was hugely popular when you were doing it, Dicky, and maybe there was a little bit of a decline, but there's such a passion for watching sidecars out racing, and particularly here on the Isle of Man, we really want to see Manxies do well, and that must be something, I think, that is really heartening from your point of view.
Yeah, because a lot of people over here know that we race. Everyone, when there's sidecar racing on that we're not in, they will always come over and say, oh, what did you think of the sidecars and blah, blah, blah. And most of the time, the feedback that we get is that there's people that watch the sidecars or are more interested in watching the sidecars go round than they are the solos.
Especially when someone's doing the Macarena on the back.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Me and my fiancée Katie were out watching the TT. We were trying to visit as many different places that we'd not been to this year, and we found a little driveway before Belig Bridge, which we were stood in, and a load of guys on mountain bikes turned up and were stood behind us, and the solo session was on, and then the solos finished, and they were like, oh right, what are we doing now, guys? And one of them turned around and said, oh, it's the sidecars next, so we can just go, we're not too interested in that. And then I kind of turned round, and one of them spotted me turn round, and Katie was like, oh, he's gonna say something, and I was like, so why do you not like the sidecars? And he was like, oh, I just find them boring. And I was like, well, have you actually watched them? He goes, well, not really, no. And I was like, well, I race one. He goes, you what? And I was like, yeah, I race one. So just have a watch from where we are. And the driveway that we were in was off the road and it goes down. So we were stood basically at road level. So our eye line was at road level. And these crows, fowls, molly, birchals came screaming past. And these guys were just stood there like with their jaws on the floor like, what are these things? And I was like, see, I told you should have stayed and watched it. And they were just asking me so many questions while they were going past and stuff like that, and they watched the whole session, and then they were like, right, we'll head off now. And I was like, so there you go, watch the sidecars.
Dare I ask you, Jim and Ben, whether the TT would ever be on the horizon for you?
It would be nice. We do want to do it if we get to that stage. Again, it's a case of being able to afford it, because TT's a step up again in costs and stuff like that. I also do have to convince my fiancée to actually let me do it, which is probably going to be the harder of the two things.
Well, it is tough, isn't it? It is tough, I think, for anybody. Almost easier when you're the person out there doing it, and watching on the sidelines is really hard.
Yeah, Katie has been amazing. I was already racing when I met her, so she knew that I did it when we got together, but I don't think she kind of thought about roads until it became a possibility, because when we first got together we were just bimbling around at the back at Derby, so they're not really doing anything. But as we progressed and got faster and it became a genuine possibility that we could do it, I think that was when she was like, right, okay, I should probably start thinking about him possibly going out onto roads. She's convinced of the Southern 100 for now, so we'll see how this goes and we'll see if she'll let us do the big one.
And Ben, would the TT be in your sights, or would it be something you'd want to do?
Yeah.
I knew I didn't even need to ask that question, actually.
It was kind of actually when we started racing, it was always in my brain at that point, because it was when I start something, I want to go to the highest as I can with it, which for someone that's grown up on the Isle of Man, watching racing, while watching the TT, Southern watching Dad, the highest level is TT. That's the toughest race. That's the end goal, really. And it's a case of doing whatever you can to kind of get there. It's when and how for me.
And Dicky, I'm guessing you knew it was never really going to be any different.
No, I mean, it's like I say, they grew up in the race paddock, but the four boys, our eldest Mark, he actually did the TT, he did 4 TTs, and then moved to Switzerland to live. I mean, he did get to be British 350 champion, 4 years on the trot. So he did all right for himself.
Ben, Dicky, Jim, it's been so lovely talking to you. We'll post the links to your social media pages. Come back once we've done Southern 100 and let's catch up with how you're doing.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Dicky, Jim and Ben Gale, absolutely brilliant. Cannot wait to find out how they do in the Southern 100. We wish them all the very best. And as I say, for some tales of what Dicky got up to when he was younger, just head over to the Journey to a Dream podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.